To create emotion in video games, programmers needed to figure out how to make a hero from a handful of pixels. But they were limited by the lack of processing power. It was the imagination of a fledgling company and an untested game designer that would soon break the story barrier. Before the Japanese company Nintendo got into video games, they produced everything from plastic toys to playing cards. In the 1970s, the century-old company dabbled in the video game business by distributing the Magnavox Odyssey in Japan. In order to establish themselves as a real player in the growing arcade market, the CEO of Nintendo, Hiroshi Yamauchi, sent his son-in-law, Minoru Arakawa, to Washington State to create Nintendo of America.
Mr. Arakawa said, okay, Radar Scope is going to be our Space Invaders, it's going to be our Pac-Man, it's going to be our big hit product. I'm going to order 3,000 of these from the Japanese offices. Before those 3,000 games get there, the test unit that they had set up at an American bar called the Spot Tavern in Seattle starts making less and less and less money. Then he realizes, oh no, I'm going to have all these Radar Scope games sitting around useless. What am I going to do?
Nintendo of America decided to convert the unsold machines into new games.
So all they needed to do was swap out a couple little pieces of paper, put in another game, and they had a totally new video game. What ends up happening is Yamauchi has no game designers. They're all working on other projects. And so he says, okay, well, we've got this guy named Miyamoto, and he went to him and said, design us a video game.
But Shigeru Miyamoto was not a game designer by trade. He was an artist and aspiring storyteller.
A lot of the early people in the game industry are essentially technologists. They were tinkerers who now had computers to tinker on rather than, a train set. But Miyamoto was an artist. He wanted to be a puppeteer. He wanted to be an entertainer of some kind.
Miyamoto had a vision of a game that would be fun and playful.
He was really trying to recreate that feeling of delight and wonderment and excitement that he had as a child exploring the world.
He was also inspired by anime and manga, the distinctly Japanese forms of animation and comic books.
Japanese anime, comic, manga are all very different from US European taste. Japanese people grew up in the environment where many childish, adorable characters were seen. And it has been 40 years. Manga and anime have affected the Japanese a lot. It is one of our key cultural components. I think our desire for these entertainments, like video games and manga, and our immature tendencies have been somehow pre-programmed within ourselves. This is something that people innately want. To grow up as a child and have someone take care of us and not wanting to die, that is our utmost desire in life, I think. Our seeking of childish and this somewhat unconscious freedom may be the reason why such culture has flourished here.
Despite his complete lack of programming experience, Miyamoto set out to break new ground.
I had an idea for a main character who was not really stunning, cool, or good-looking like Superman. Because characters in video games have to fit on a small screen, the design had to be less complicated.
In 1981, Nintendo released Donkey Kong. The video gaming world had its first superstar, a portly plumber named Mario.
It was the first time it really was the most fleshed out character. The idea that a video game should not just be about Armageddon's coming and you have to shoot this down or defend yourself about this, but it actually is about a character and there's a sort of moral imperative that you have to save your girlfriend from this nasty gorilla.
Well, if you go back to kind of American gaming in the 70s, a lot of the games didn't have a central character. It was a square block. And you kind of had to imagine that that white blinking dot is a tennis racket or a guy or, you know, a boat or a car. The medium was so limited. It was so hard to build a character that was recognizable.
And so Mario could only be a certain size. So Mario has a really big nose because it's easy to see a nose on somebody's face. Mario has a mustache because there weren't enough pixels to define a mouth underneath that nose. He wears a hat because it's really difficult to do hairstyles in an old arcade game like that.
The red suit that Jumpman wore, that was a trick that the engineers at Nintendo taught him, that if you want one character to be recognized on the screen, put him in this crazy color. So he had to learn all of those things, but he brought with him the imagination of an artist and the way of storytelling that an artist would bring. And that was something very, very, very important to the industry, especially at that time.
At that time, we would still draw rough sketches of the character in animation on paper and move them to get an idea of how it would look. So that's what we did. Like when he is running at breakneck speed, if he were to stop and turn suddenly, naturally he would slide. So we would try to add an animation of him sliding with a screech.
Miyamoto also turned a few computer beeps into Donkey Kong's unforgettable soundtrack. Soon, everyone wanted in on the fun. Nintendo had its first hit, and Mario would soon become more recognizable than Mickey Mouse.